Hello everyone and welcome to the webinars hosted by EDB. My name is Monica and I am part of the marketing team here at Enterprise DB. I will be your host for today's webinar, Beginner's Guide to High Availability for Postgres. I am joined by Gabby Childers today, Senior Sales Engineer here at EDB. Before we get started, I just want to go through a few housekeeping items. This presentation is being recorded. We will be sharing the recording along with the slides after the broadcast. The lines are currently muted. If you have any questions, please feel free to submit it in the questions panel. Today's session is scheduled for 1 hour. We expect the presentation to last most of our time today, and we will allot any extra time for Q&A. If we do not have time to address all questions, we will follow up afterwards with any attendee whose question was not answered. And now, without any further ado, Gabby, over to you.
Thank you for the introduction and welcome everyone. As Monica stated, this is a session that we do in our regular series of webinars, and we will be having new webinars on different topics in the coming weeks, and we'll tell you more about them later. First of all, a bit of background. As stated, the housekeeping items are on your screen right now. But I also want to add that due to this rather strange time, I'm doing this webinar from my home. So if at any time you hear strange background noises, that unfortunately is unavoidable. It's a consequence of not being in an office. I hope that doesn't disturb the following through, and apologies also for the slight strange view of my background because there is sunlight streaming into this room that I can't block. So, on the topic of today, what we're going to discuss today is the topic of HA, high availability. And what we're going to talk about is what it really means to be highly available, what the measurement criteria are for high availability, how it works, at least for databases, how you can achieve high availability with Postgres and our EDB tools. I'm going to talk a bit more about the technical details of that and how to keep an eye on high availability using our tools. And I'm going to show you some scenarios for things like upgrading where you are expected to have some interruption of service and how you can mitigate that. So talking about high availability, what is interesting is that although it's formally a well-defined concept, as you can find through research, people do have some different outlooks on what high availability means in practicality. But let's look at the formal definition first. So high availability is defined as a characteristic of a system which aims to ensure an agreed level of operational performance, and that's usually uptime, for a higher than normal period. And this is already contentious because what is normal? And for which parts of your business which levels of HA are required, for instance. So we're going to get into that, and what we're going to talk about is what are the key principles to achieve high availability, and what are the risks and issues that you might come across when you look into achieving high availability. More practically speaking, in computing, the term availability is used to describe a service normally, and it's described as a continuous and consistently correct functioning of a system or service as provided to its users. However, you can measure high availability as a value, but what are you measuring on? And that again is one of those contentious questions, because are you just looking at the hardware, the underlying hardware, and how available it is? Or are you more interested in the IT infrastructure, for instance, things like networking? Or are you in the end just interested in how available the business application is? So the end-to-end availability of an application. All of these have their own way of looking at what is important. And we'll get back to those measurement criteria later on in the slides and the discussion afterwards. But first, I want to take you through some of the things that influence high availability, independent of what the item is that you're measuring on. And what we're looking at here is a split into two categories of interruption of service. One is a scheduled or planned downtime, which results, for instance, from maintenance or other operations that cannot be done while the system is running, is active, right? And when it gets to the hardware or the infrastructure, those include things like rebooting or reconfiguring a network or other changes in the environment that you must make. Whereas from the business side, business application side, it's, for instance, a case where the application is needed at certain points in time because in a weekend there is no business. So in that case, if the application is unavailable, that is not an issue to the business. The other side of that coin is unscheduled and unplanned downtime. And these are the results of things going wrong. Whereas with scheduled and planned downtime, you had an idea about how to get from operational to non-operational to operational again. In unscheduled downtime, what happens is that a part of your infrastructure is misbehaving, and as a result, the service is interrupted. If you really want to make a good calculation of where you want to be with your availability, you must first make a very good overview of all the aspects of your operation that can influence downtime. And why do I say this? Because if you look at just one of these aspects of your availability, you may be surprised when something goes wrong that was outside of your view and where you then run into an issue that you didn't expect and where you get downtime from, even though you thought you had all the items covered that you thought were necessary. And I'll talk about that a bit more later on. But let's first look at how availability is calculated, because as I've stated, availability can be measured on different factors. But a very important factor is the amount of uptime that a system has. And if you look at the availability as a calculated percentage of the amount of time that a system is up and down, available versus unavailable, then you come to a measurement that many of you probably have heard of, which is the measurement in the amount of nines. And the amount of nines is a description of the percentage of availability of the application. And to many people, this is a measuring stick that isn't as clear as it probably should be, or at least the implications aren't as clear as they should be. Because if we look at this table, what you see from this is that if you have just 4 nines, which for some is considered not that good, right? It still already results in only allowing for less than an hour of downtime per year, less than 5 minutes per month, 1 minute per week, or a downtime per day of a mere 9 seconds.